Okay, guys, today we're talking about Mexico real estate, and a lot of you have expressed some similarities to our market. We're going to introduce the Mexico market, as we've been experiencing it, just to give you a few just agenda and things we're going to be covering. It's quite a bit, but it's important for everybody to know this in case you want to send a referral, because understanding this will help start the conversation with your clients. First, I'll introduce our team. Our group is called Unicorn Properties. We're part of EXP Chicago, started in Chicago. Now we're full-time in Mexico. And I've been studying the market for the last 3 years, since 2021, full-time almost. I live there now. So I go back and forth to help clients transition from the Midwest, usually in the US, but we also help Canadians and other people in the US come to Mexico and understand the market. We do weekly workshops on how to buy in Mexico for buyers and investors. And we also train agents on how to refer business better or how to understand the market. So the more you know, the more you can, your clients are informed. Here's my WhatsApp. I think most of you have it, so since we connected through there. And these are our channels. Our YouTube has most of our content that is free, Unicorn Properties. So you can grab any information there from compliance, legal, insurance, immigration stuff that has to do with Mexico. And that's my cell phone. The reason that we like to help our clients in this way is because we not only talk about real estate sales, we talk about the whole ecosystem. At least for Mexico, we have all this covered as our partners. So we build the partnerships, and I'm sure you have too in your own countries. And if you haven't, probably you want to get this going, because this will help your client have peace of mind to finish the process with you. In other countries, real estate is not as official, let's say, as in US or Canada. So clients struggle to buy real estate abroad because of the fear that, there's going to be, I don't know how to finance my property. I don't know anything about legal. If I can own property there, what do I do with my rental income, or who's going to take care of my property? So all these things that are, current clients always have that question, is like, we have to solve it for them, because if you want to sell the real estate, it has to come with all this. So also, people ask me, do I have to be a Mexican citizen to buy? No, you don't have to. There's ways around it. And then we'll also have construction and architecture in case people buy land, and we help them, similar to Ernesto, like, hey, we have a piece of land. Let us, make the best use of that land based on what you want to do on your project. It can be a house, commercial, or mixed use. So we have a whole team of construction in Mexico, especially in the Yucatan Peninsula. You guys have commissions everywhere. We are from 2 to 10% right now in Mexico. It depends on the developer we work with. It depends on the listing type, and it depends on the partnership with the other realtor that is probably listing or we're working with that might not be in our team. So this is this is the commissions we'll be splitting with you guys in case we have a transaction, and we have a very transparent system so you know that any referral that you send, what is the commission for the product that the client selects. So the commission comes after the client makes a decision on what to buy, and we'll tell you what that is and what percentage you get from there. Usually we do up to 30% on our commission. If the client is ready to go, they have their cash ready to go, we're like done in 5 minutes, we can do 50-50 for sure. But usually this is kind of our sweet spot. And if it's a complex client that doesn't buy for about a year or so, then we kind of like take this down, we tune it down a little less, or we'll be transparent with you. This client is not ready yet, it's going to take a year or two. So then we go maybe like up to 15 to 20. So that's kind of how we have split it based on complexity of clients. I'm sure that you might have a similar system for your referrals, but this is kind of what we've been doing that has been working for us. So for every $10,000 USD commission that we get, you get like your 3,000 as a referral agent. And this is just, will vary based on the amount of GCI. The good news is that we now have a system for referrals online. Before, we used to have a video to show our agents how to write this contract, fill it out, and send it to all the managing brokers to sign and all the parties. Now you can scan this QR code, although the website is not working too well today, and this will take you to the referral portal. You can send a referrals to the portal to anybody in this call if you're in workplace. So this is super helpful because they used to have it in the US and Canada, but they didn't have it in other countries. So for Mexico, we still had to do this contract. Now we're getting there. We're rolling this out. Still has some bugs, but it's working now. So if you have any referrals or questions, make sure that you find each other within the portal. And also, I don't know if you have created your profile, but you have to create a profile for people to send you referrals. And this has nothing to do with Workplace. It's a whole different portal. So I can show you after if you guys have any questions, if you haven't done your profile yet, based on your primary market. My profile right now is pointed to Mexico because I don't transact too much real estate in Chicago anymore. Something to keep in mind, and probably you've lived through this as well, is that in EXP and in Mexico, there's a lot of, for us, there's a lot of two types of agents, not a lot, just two. We have our remote agents, like, hey, we know about the market, but there's some agents, even within EXP, that are sitting in the middle of the country of Ciudad de Mexico or Monterrey, and they're promoting other areas. They might know about the areas, but nobody knows the area more than the person who is actually there every day. So we have the remote agents and we have the showing agents. And this call is for us to motivate more on referring to agents that are on the ground. Because as you know, if you're in Portugal, in Lisbon, and if I'm in Chicago, I cannot sell Lisbon like the same way I can, sell Chicago because I'm in Chicago. So I've divided the groups in remote agents and showing agents. Our showing agents are the ones that are every day on the ground. Like G is going there to Spain. So now we can send her referrals to Spain because she's physically there. Now she can learn about the market, be there for a few months, come back home to Seattle and be a remote agent for Spain, but she cannot close the full transaction unless probably she can do showings. So then that's how we kind of separate a little bit, because there has been some cases that we're looking for agents in Puerto Vallarta, and then we find agents in Puerto Vallarta in Workplace, but they don't live there. So they refer us to somebody else to show us the places. So that kind of breaks the process a little bit. I don't know if you have experienced that. You can give me your comments at the end. But if you're not on the location, probably the referral should go straight to the agent who's on the location. You can understand the market. What I do is I onboard our own clients, but we have my team specifically under me showing these homes. So if the process doesn't break, the client is always dealing with me for the transaction all the way to closing, because I'm the person that goes holding their hand all the way through the process. Even with our attorney, with the notary, with all the process for immigrations, we help them with all that. The showing will be done by my team unless I'm not there. But if I'm there, I'll be doing the showings myself too. So we understand the market. But if you send me a referral, we'll take care of the referral from beginning to end, including the showings. So I separate this just because we had some issues with our agents that are not physically there. And I think it's worth mentioning, and let me know your thoughts, if you had any issues like that. When it comes to Mexico itself, we're gonna talk about legalities and financing super fast. And this is the type of properties that we sell is similar. When I was in Lisbon, it was like, it's very similar. Spain is very similar. We have the pre-built, pre-construction developments. And then we have the built assets that are finished, ready to go, houses, condos, townhouses, villas. In the pre-built side, of course, nothing exists, it's just land for now. And of course, they give you a time frame that when is this gonna be finished, and you buy into the promise that it will be delivered to you at one point. Then we have land, lots of land, and you can buy in an open space, like in the city, or you can buy it in a gated community, which we have a lot in Mexico. And we have mixed use also that can be usually it's open land, meaning like if you go to Playa del Carmen and in the street, you find a lot, that's mixed use usually. You can do commercial and residential. But the thing that you shouldn't buy and your client shouldn't buy at all or looked at is ejidal. Ejidal is community-owned land in Mexico that has been given from the government to the farmers to work the land. So nobody's the owner of this. It's a community-owned land. So if your client is telling you, hey, I found a lot in Mexico or in Riviera Maya for $10,000, that's pretty not realistic. And probably he's looking at ejidal land. And an international buyer cannot buy ejidal land unless it gets transformed or processed as a private property, which takes 2 to 3 years. So if your client is telling you like, hey, tell me more about, I want to learn more, but my friend told me that it's 10,000. We'll check into this with our attorney physically. Sometimes they have to go to the city to check, the PIN numbers of the properties. And at that point, we'll tell you, hey, it's compliant or it's not. If it's not, we don't even touch it, because then our client will get in a lot of legal trouble because he's buying something he cannot own. So if our client wants to own, probably that you shouldn't deal with this. There's a lot of other land that is private property that can be sold easily in this case. Of course, we have the custom construction, personalized homes, and then we work with our construction team to work on this for them and however they want to see it. And like there's so many ways to how you can build your perfect home, to just keep land and then build one day later. So this is up to every client. We're going to focus on the first two because they're the most popular ones. The pre-built, usually here, and I heard that this happens in Spain and Portugal too, which is awesome. You buy it and then the seller is the one financing. So the one here, it's the developer itself is the one that is going to give you the loan. It's a loan, but it's kind of also a payment plan. So it's usually zero interest. So you don't have to pay any interest on this part because the developer is giving it to you and you're going to take maybe 2 to 3 years to pay it off. But then only at that point they give it to you. So there's no interest involved in that process. It's just then giving you a payment plan for a long period of time or short period of time, and then you can own it after you pay it off. So then that's when the title happens, right after you finish paying it off. Then we have the banks, and the banks only lend on properties that are finished, meaning a finished house, a finished building, something tangible. Banks will not lend on pre-built projects. So these do not cross because these ones don't exist, they don't have a title. So at that point, once they're done with this, you can put a loan after it's built. So then at that point, you have, you can get a loan. We have lending agents that can help you with this process and can help your client qualify for a house, condo, or townhouse up to a couple $1 million. So we also have private lenders that is a little higher on the interest, but then this is kind of a way that people buy in Mexico. So either, you have cash and you pay it off, you buy with seller financing, or you buy through the bank, and this only when it's finished. Some lending options in Mexico here these are some of our partners. We have 2 more brokers that we work with that will qualify your client, if he's Canadian or American, with their salary in their country, with their, the credit score on their country, and any bank statements on their country. So they don't need to be Mexico citizens or residents to qualify for certain loans that are for international buyers. We have lenders that will lend to international buyers. These are just some of them. How does it work, the process? So development payment plans. How does it work and what do I do at the beginning? First, we have to verify that the development is in good standing. We don't sell anything that hasn't been vetted by our attorney, and they vet this like daily. And we always check the status of the developer because, it will vary. Like, you don't know who's gonna go bankrupt and who's gonna not deliver on time. And then sometimes they're behind on schedule for a different project. So if they're behind on schedule for a different project, we need to know why. Because if they're behind in one, they might be behind on others. So we always keep track of what's happening in the area, because not everybody, unfortunately, finishes what they start. So that's kind of a risk that clients might have, but that's why we try to mitigate that risk at the beginning by researching the developer really well before we offer that product. So that's why we have a limited inventory. We can show the client everything so they understand the market, but we'll recommend a few, very few, that are solid. How does it work? Most likely the client's gonna give an enganche, which is escrow, earnest money, I'm sorry, and that can be maybe $5,000 or less, depending on what the negotiation is. At that point, they will give you all the contracts for you to review, and then they'll see, you have time with your attorney to see, if there's any issues with the land, who's the owner, whoever says the owner is the actual person on the title. And all this due diligence will happen at the beginning. If something is shady, the attorney will tell you, this is not good here, here, and here, and I don't recommend it. Or yeah, it's actually really solid, it's a good developer, has reputation, he's been delivering what they say they're gonna deliver, and continue with your down payment. So the down payment comes after, usually it's from 20 to 30% of the whole value. So it's not a little amount, it's regular, but depending on what you buy. If it's a piece of land that is only 40,000, then this is not much. If it's a house that is probably 200,000, then you're talking about maybe 60,000 or more. So keep that in mind, because clients sometimes think that they can be like, hey, I can buy in Mexico for cheap. There's some ways you can, But sometimes if the house is finished or the house is about to get finished, they have to come up with quite a bit of money at the beginning. The rest of the remaining balance can be done up until whenever they finish, they give you the key. Let's say you buy a condo in pre-sale and you are doing your down payments and you agree with the developer that you're going to pay monthly payments up until they give you the key. And that you can divide it in equal amounts, for that amount of months until they're done. Or you can do a quarterly payment every 6 months or a balloon payment at the end, and then you don't have to worry about any payments in the middle, but only at the end. Sometimes people do that as an investment because they don't have to pay anything until the end. So they will buy it, keep it, and when they sell, because it's pre-sale, pre-construction, at that point the price is already higher. So they sell for a markup, and then sometimes they don't even have to put the money at the end because they already sold it. So it's a good option for some people that want to invest, maybe 30% on a property, but they don't plan to keep it. They just want to flip it. There's another option. But this is kind of like the way where you can insert the bank is only when the property is finished at the end, usually. So the bank loan only comes when they give you the keys, you have a title, and that's when they can give you a loan for the remaining balance, but not before. When you don't have a title, the bank will not give you any loans. Let's talk about legal and pre-built a little bit on when do you need
Nathaly,
Yes.
I just want to say something because besides being a real estate broker in Mexico, myself, I am a licensed mortgage broker. There is actually a possibility with at least a couple of banks that actually could be in position of lending money to foreigners, especially Canadians and Americans, even if it's a pre-construction project. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. Send us the list because we're gonna vet them. We're checking just interest rates and license. So if you guys have that, we'll add it to the presentation for sure. Because we haven't found anybody who would like to lend on pre-built without a title, unless it's hard money lending, and that's expensive. So it depends on the client. Awesome. For the legal part, for pre-built, the attorney should be involved at the beginning, like just right at the beginning, because first you need to, when you do your earnest money, you need to check the title and everybody who's, in that, all the paperwork that it comes when they give you this stack of contracts of like, this is who we are, this is what we do, these are the owners and all the compliance stuff. So the pre-sale states, even before your money, you put any money farther than the enganche, which is the earnest money, will be the due diligence process goes at the beginning. Then we do the promise letter, and then we do the down payment. So the down payment happens at the right at the beginning. During the construction, of course, you want to have your realtor being able to send you pictures, progress notes, where the project is at, and then also before you do your final payment, make sure that there is something getting built. So the process of building, when they finish, they can give you the keys, but the title won't be done for probably another 3 to 6 to 12 months until they register this property with the city and they give you a title when they do that. Usually the cities are behind a little bit. So it took us, for us, when we bought a condo in Playa del Carmen, almost a year to get our title. But that's part of the regular process. So the client sometimes gets scared because they're like, I have my keys, it's closing day, but I don't have my title. So we're like, well, that's normal in Mexico. I think it's normal in any pre-construction, even in Canada, I heard. So it's not that you get your title right away, but have your attorney check as you're getting your keys to make sure that everything that they told you that is going to be in the unit is in the unit. Then we have the closing time, which will be no closing, but it will be right after, you get the keys. And at that point, the fideicomiso, if you're an international buyer, will apply to you if you're buying near the water. So if you're 50 kilometers from the water, to a coast, you have to get a fideicomiso, which is a trust. And this trust will just give you the extra layer of, because people sometimes think that you cannot buy in Mexico if you're not a Mexican citizen, but you can. So then the fideicomiso is the extra paperwork that you need to have this property under your name, and you're the beneficiary of your own property. At that point, you can decide whether it's a fideicomiso or you want to incorporate a company, which is optional, and you can put several properties under that company. I don't fully recommend it because it's different from the US. In US, we want to create an LLC for every property. In Mexico, maintaining a company is a little harder, and you have to do your tax declaration every month. It's not every year. So there's a compliance to be followed. Otherwise, your risk to be audited. So it takes a lot of compliance to follow incorporating a company versus having a fideicomiso when the client is closing. For post-sale, we have the title registration after maybe a year after. And then at that point, you can do the appraisal, and then you will have the HOA, how much it's going to be exactly. It's going to be based on the size of your property. And then when it goes to closing, the closing table, meaning you go to the notary, you have your title, there's going to be the sales tax that is going to be applied to that. And also, a client has to calculate maybe anywhere from 7 to 10% of the value of the home for closing costs. So that's an extra expense too at the end. In the US, that gets bundled up with the mortgage, but in Mexico, is an expense that has to be considered at the end when your client's gonna do the title. Usually the developers have a guarantee for a year, up to a year, in case there's any foundation issues, any big issues that haven't been resolved from their build. This is the fideicomiso, a little more information, and we can go deep on this topic. You have a whole interview with our attorney in YouTube about fideicomiso and what it is and what is it for, who needs it. But basically, it is a bank trust that allows you to invest in any property that is near the water. And the reason that Mexico protects their borders is because is to protect from invasion. That's what the border towns or beach towns are protected areas, meaning you can still own there, but you need this extra paper to be like, hey, if you set up a military base in this area, probably will not renew your fideicomiso. But if you're a regular citizen, you just want to enjoy the beach, they'll renew your fideicomiso every 50 years. So 50 kilometers from the water or 100 from a border town. There's different types of fideicomiso, and there's kind of more legal stuff, but there's a cost to it to set it up. And there's a cost to it that is yearly, which is not much. I just kind of consider it like maybe as just an extra legal fee, but it's per year, so it's not too much. There's some banks that do it, and we can go over property taxes, which is my favorite topic. And when it comes to property taxes, this is an example. It's a case study, and just so you get an idea on how much you pay for your property in Mexico compared to the US. Because for us, if I have a property this big in Chicago, actually my condo is about this big, maybe it's 1,300. So it's smaller than this. And when you have this type of, this size of condo or house, and let's say that you pay for it about $155,000, your yearly taxes are going to be about 12,000 pesos, which is this times 2. So we're talking about $700 per year. So this is the most expensive area in Mexico, because this is really expensive for Mexico. So we're talking about maybe $700 a year in your property taxes for a property that is maybe 160,000, which in the US probably might be above 2,000 or 3,000 per year. So you're already saving a lot in property taxes if you're learning more about the Mexican market. And I think it's similar in Portugal. It's very little, the impuesto predial, the property tax. So it's very important to keep this in mind for your clients, because they will ask you, why should I invest in Mexico? First, your fixed costs are less, and your property taxes are not going to kill you, because even if you're retiring, you still have to pay property taxes on your property in the US. Here is like almost like pennies to the dollar based on your property size. And this is the most expensive. This is in Tulum. This is the area that is like the priciest. But then if you go in other areas in Mexico, this is much less. So but people usually, I ask them to budget maybe $600 a year, depending on the size of the property, for a tax bill. So let's talk about the area that we cover right now with our team. Is Riviera Maya and Yucatan. I live in Merida, and I come and go to Playa del Carmen because it's really close. So we have a lot of traffic coming through Riviera Maya, but people end up buying Yucatan because when they compare the states and the benefits, they see the price is much more reasonable in Yucatan. What is that? we're here. So if you see the peninsula, this is similar to Florida. And we have the same weather, same, like lifestyle, similar, we have party area, we have beach area, we have the Caribbean beach, white sands. So if you want to buy the same condo that you buy in Miami for, close to the water, it will be much more expensive in Miami, of course, you guys know, because the price per square foot is just, probably 10x ours. So in this area, you can buy a condo for under 200,000 for 2 bed, 2 bath. In Merida, for 200,000, you can get a full house, a 3-bedroom. That's why we cover the whole peninsula, because our target market is like, it depends on what their budget is. And Merida is growing a lot. So that's why we're here, focused here, because it's one of the safest cities in Mexico. It's the top 3 in Latin America for safety. So this is our favorite town, and it's a beach town. So we can cover all these areas. So think about this as Miami and this as Tampa. They're almost, similar geographically. Let's say here for why Cancun area is so popular. Well, everybody knows Cancun from the movies and everything. And the airport is number 2 in connectivity after Mexico City. So there's a ton of flights coming here from all over the world. So then that's why Cancun is kind of a point that is very commercial. And that's why it's right now, based on volume, the flights and everything else, that's why we have the second busiest airport in Mexico. And right now they just created a new airport in Tulum. I'll show you why. The Tulum airport was delivered on December 2023 last year. And the reason was that Cancun is over here, Tulum is over here. Tulum was getting very popular because of some shows that happened there. So then it grew a lot to the point that it's almost saturated sometimes. So we have clients asking for Tulum when they go to Tulum and they're like, wait, this is so packed. I get a studio for the amount of money that I wanted to get a house. So then we kind of show them around so they understand the difference between the markets. And sometimes they end up buying in Playa del Carmen or Merida because Tulum is a little saturated, but it's growing quite a bit. So the new airport has brought a lot of traffic to that area. And that's why Tulum, you hear about Tulum from everybody that wants to buy in Mexico. They're like, I want to buy in Tulum. But then we'll explain, the why is just because it's growing. The airport now is open and it's an international airport, so you can fly from anywhere in this, from these airlines from these cities. And also something of a benefit has been the Tren Maya, which is a train that recently was launched as of last year as well, because of the connectivity was not existing, it was only like a road. So this train is bringing a lot of, abundance to the area, because now you have a mode of transportation that can take you from Cancun to Merida, from Cancun to Tulum, and then from other areas all the way to Chetumal. So the reason that they created this train is because not only for connectivity for passengers, but also for cargo, because we have a biggest port in Progreso, which is near Merida, that brings a lot of, that ships and receives a lot of merchandise from different parts of the world and ships back to the US. So this is why this port is so important as well. This is the train, and these are some fun facts about the train. And it's finished, it's working in certain areas, and they're still finishing the stations in the other ones. So the people who bought near the train, right now they're seeing an appreciation on their land, almost double. So if they bought it for like 25,000, now it's at least 50. So that area is still growing until, it's not everything finished yet, but the real estate in that area, as when anything that has to come with infrastructure, it increases quite a bit. A few things on why this comes to a little bit of architecture and construction. I don't know if you guys know about the history in Yucatan and how it got created. There's a theory on why Yucatan, is so popular, and it's because, if you haven't seen, Yucatan was created when the meteor hit the Earth back when the dinosaurs got extinct. So Yucatan has this crater in the middle, and because when the meteor hit the Earth, it kind of like, there was a lot of fire and explosion, but it got bubbles inside the Earth. So there were a lot of bubbles that got solidified, and that's why we have the cenotes now. So the cenotes are underground caves. I don't know if I have any picture here. Like this. So cenotes are like, yeah, underground caves that have water, but that have been formed because of an explosion. So you see a lot of shallow land in Mexico, in that peninsula, because of the way that it got created. So it's a fun fact and a story. Of course, we don't know if it's true, but I think it looks very true because from space you can see the crater. So we have a lot of these geographical settings in Mexico, in that peninsula. So when it comes to construction, we have to be super mindful of where you build and what's underneath, because the height of your building will depend on that, on how much you can build on top of each other. If you're building if you have a cenote in your land, probably you cannot build on top of this, but you can build over here, and based on the density, there's a topographo, in Spanish it's called topographo, I don't know in English, but they can measure the density of the land and to see how high your building can go based on what the land can sustain. That's why ground density is so important in that area when it comes to construction, because if you buy in an area that is very shallow and they want to do a 7-floor resort, that's not going to happen because it's going to collapse. The weight is going to not withstand it. So before you buy land, we have to make sure that the client is protected, not only because there's some land where you cannot build anything. It's a protected land, like from the country, like they have protected areas. So when it comes to buying land, you can buy land and just let the trees and the trees grow and the birds fly, but you cannot build there. So we have to make sure that if the client plans to build in there, it's compliant to the code, let's say, the code in the area. We check that with the attorney. So we have a lot of cenotes, caves, underground caves. And for the sake of building, we need to check all these tiny things that are not around the world. I mean, sometimes you don't have to even worry about this probably in Spain because it's a solid land. But we have to worry about these variations in our area because it does make a difference on how dense your land is. So, it can vary. If you want to do, 1 to 6 floors, it will be defined by the density of the land where you're buying. Construction costs, there's some more about construction costs. If you're interested for clients, this are just some examples of how much it will cost. And this keeps going up in price every year because of course, the amount of, the labor cost is going up, material cost is going up. So this is an estimate as of December 2023, probably is going up slightly or more. Obra negra is what we call it, like just the structure, and it's an estimate on the structure. No windows, no doors, no finishes. So just add on top of that the finishes. So this is just an example for construction, and I won't go too deep on that unless you guys are curious, because I can talk about construction all day. I like it. And the good thing is that the way that the processed water is more organic in a way through septic tanks. Each house has one, and there's not like a plumbing system that is like a sewer system that will take in all your water. You have to process the water in their own house, because the ground is so hard because of the geographical variation of our area that you cannot build pipes all across. It's just like the land, the rock is too harsh. So the ground, that's why each home will have their own septic tank, which we call it biodigestores, and it will process their own water. And after a while, they just remove this as a septic tank. And this is better for the environment as well. So that's what I like. This is some cost on how much it costs, but the architect and construction team will take care of this. And if you buy a project, this will be done for your client, so they don't have to worry about it. We have relocation partners as well, as I mentioned, that will help clients move from one location to the other. And he does relocation across the world. So they're based out of Costa Rica, but we can have them, this is a website, International Relocation Partners. And what I like from our partner here is that he will vet the best route for your client and the one that has, least friction when it comes to the customs and everything else like that. So that's kind of what I have. A few risks to consider. Super important. If you want to take a screenshot of this page, probably your risks in your countries might be the same. We don't have an MLS, so we are working, with fragmented data. So we have to grab from different sources, different portals, in addition to the one we have in EXP, because we don't have an MLS. So we have to like ask other local agents, hey, do you have, if somebody asks for something very specific, like, hey, I want a 4-bedroom house near Playa del Carmen, but it has to have these requirements. So those are the hardest clients to find because we have to go like on the ground to see what's available on the listings because we don't have an MLS. We have to ask the local brokers. We have some portals, but we don't have a streamlined system yet. We're not regulated. So as G mentioned earlier, anybody can wake up and be a realtor, literally. And unfortunately, that causes a lot of problems for clients because they trust somebody that they don't know what they're doing. So if you're going to spend money on your commission to pay somebody, do you rather pay somebody who doesn't know anything, is not going to protect you, or somebody who's going to hold your hand through the process and they know the legal part of things? Probably the second. But that's what we had to emphasize so much on the on why some people will promote themselves as realtors online, but they truly don't have your best interest or they don't know. So if they don't know, I mean, it's not their fault, but it's not regulated. That's why anybody can be a realtor. Some of the jokes in Riviera Maya is the best realtors are the taxi drivers because they will, drive you around, they pick you up from the airport and they're like, hey, and then you're gonna be like, hey, so what's your plans for this trip? Well, I'm going to here, this tourism, and maybe I'm considering to buy something here. The taxi driver will take you to their realtor or their brokerage, quote unquote, their friend, and will tell you, oh, you should buy from my friend. He's a great realtor, and probably they're just recommending you somebody that might or might not know what they're doing, because they're the first point of contact with the tourist. That's kind of where most of the scams start. If you haven't gone through that, please don't have your clients trust just anybody. At least they can check, their credentials. If they've been in business for a while, you can see that in social media now more than these days than before. We have a manual process, low tech, title issues. We have to always have an attorney for every single transaction. We have to check out with our attorney. Hey, is this title clean? Anybody else can claim this. There is probably one sister that is representing the whole family, but there are 6 sisters or siblings that need to sign too. And if they're not agreeing with that, the one sister cannot sell, but they're attempting to sell sometimes in those cases. So we have to be super mindful if the title is clean. We have to check that. There's scams every day and probably everywhere around the world. So we have to protect our client that is seeing, things that are, that are too nice to be true, and probably they are, to make sure that they don't bite into any of these, because they will give some down payment. I know people that I'm working with a client right now for a listing that he sent money, and he was Canadian and he trusted another Canadian because they were, because you just are aligned with your people. And apparently he told him to deposit his down payment in an account that was an escrow account, but he lost all his down payment because then that person just disappeared. So that's why it's so important not to trust anybody. Don't put any money unless you know where it's going. And hopefully you'll do this transaction, or your client does this transaction in person. If they don't do it in person, we already have some databases that we already vetted, that we have some developers that are good at, you don't send me money, you don't send the other realtor money, we send it to the developer under the name of the developer. So we avoid any title issues or scams. So more things here, on the why, work with somebody who knows their market, physically is there, and is plugged in to connected to all the WhatsApp local groups, because in Mexico, everything happens in WhatsApp. Nothing happens online. So if you're not plugged into certain WhatsApp groups, on the warnings, like, hey, this guy has done fraud for 10 people and I keep hearing about it, so probably you don't work with this guy. So then all the communication is done through WhatsApp. All the be aware communication is done in WhatsApp in different groups that are locally. And if you're not in that group, or if you're new, they might not add you to the group because they don't want competition. My realtors in Mexico are in those groups because I'm not even that group. So I always check with them, hey, what's up? Can you check on this developer? So yeah, that's kind of like the risks that your client can encounter, but we always plugged in to the news, let's say, on what's happening and who's doing the right thing, who's doing, the wrong thing. And we are just aware of that, and we don't work with anybody who just has like any hint of fraud. So also, as you guys know, there is not only language differences, it's always terminology. you know, when you are working with a client that you know that is from, like Legis is in Spain, right? Like she can work with US buyers, and we can talk about terminology all day on how you do an operation in US compared to Spain. So then you can take them through the process of the parallel terminology, and then you can close the transaction a little bit easier than somebody local that maybe or might not know exactly what the client wants to hear when it comes to ROI, return on investment, the flip, you know, how long is, you know, what's cap rate, what's my capital gains tax, and all those things that probably will be second nature to us, but it's not second nature to the locals unless they actually have studied or have lived it. Yeah, unless you live there or you move around like Ernesto, you know, he's been in Canada, here, there. He knows about his market, and he can convey that to his clients because he's been around. So he understands different terminologies for different countries and how that, you know, culture thinks. We have a lot of issues unfortunately, that our providers, usually sometimes our vendors, that we have testing, we're testing for property managers. Some people don't take their business seriously. So they don't answer the phone. They don't do the thing that they said they're gonna do. They don't finish the job. That happens with contractors a lot in the US. But in Mexico, we find a little harder to find good talent because sometimes people don't take their business seriously, or they're in business one day, outside of the business the other day, when it comes to a service industry, like property managers or like builders or architects or el albañil, you know, the person who's going to be doing the construction. So we always try to vet that database all the time because we have encountered like even interior designers that have worked well with one client, but then the other client didn't finish the job, and now the client is calling us, hey, the lady disappeared. And I'm like, why people are disappearing so much? So that's the thing, like we have to like always be checking and rechecking our database of referrals of our partners, because unless they're meeting the criteria, we don't want to work with anybody who's not going to answer the phone. So then that's why we rely a lot of person-to-person recommendations. We don't try, I mean, Google reviews are important, but it's better if somebody tells you, hey, this person, I know them. They work with me and my sister and my brother, and I know they're legit. So that's why we start start working with them. And if it works out, good. But I'm sure you guys encounter a lot of these, in your own countries and areas. And now with this, I'll finish and open it for questions and stop recording. So hopefully this was helpful. Let me see.